In this lecture we're going to look at the editing tools in detail. Let's start with the Eyedropper tool. The Eyedropper tool, that's this one over here, looks like that. So let's find that tool, there it is. And it has a series of preferences that we can choose. We can choose to have any of these or none of them. In this exercise we're just going to look at picking up the fill attributes and the pen attributes. Because of the objects I've got selected, it even doesn't matter if I use the line end marker. So the fill attributes, in this case it's the magenta color, and the pen attributes would be the line weight and the color of the red going around it. So you can choose which parts of this you want to pick up. So for example, for the pen attributes, you might not want to pick up the color, you might only want to pick up the thickness. So in other words, it would pick up that red thick line, but it would apply it to this object as a thick black line because it's only looking at the thickness of that line. Let's just try some of these to start with. So I've got two modes here. This is the suck up or the pick up attributes, and this is the put down or apply. And on a Windows machine it's the control key toggles, on a Macintosh it's the option key. So you can see my cursor toggles when I hold the key down. So we hold the key down, suck up the attributes, then click on the object and apply those attributes. Let's go back to our preferences. This time I'm going to show you what I was talking about before, where we only want to apply the thickness. Click OK, so we suck up those attributes and then we apply them to that. And you'll notice that while it put the fill color in, it didn't change the color going around it. So there are a lot of choices there and you can save them. So what we can do is we can say all attributes, plug in parameters or whatever you've got selected, and the way this works is you choose the options that you want, then click on the Save button and we'll name them Graphics. So Graphic Attributes, click OK and then OK again. And now you see that I've got graphic attributes here, so I can choose between all attributes, just the graphic attributes, or just the plugin parameters. So this becomes a very powerful tool. When you finish that exercise, go to your Active Layer button and choose the next exercise down, the Select Similar tool. We're going to look for the Select Similar tool. The Select Similar tool is one of the Designer series tools. Now I've included it because it's so powerful, but you will have to go to Tools on the menu bar, Workspaces, and choose your Designer or your Professional workspace. So Landmark, Architect, Spotlight, so on. And then on your basic tool palette you'll find this new tool called the Select Similar tool. The Select Similar tool allows you to select objects that are similar, but it also allows you to define how similar they need to be. This is our preferences. So if we have a look, we can choose to define an object and say select all the objects that have the same, for example, class, or the same object type, or the class and the object type. And once you've made these choices, you can click on the Save button here and you can save this as a set. So just have a look here. I've already got one which is class, I've got one here which is object, and one here which is both object and class. That makes it much quicker to create your settings. Now I haven't bothered using all these other settings. You can try them out if you like, but I just wanted you to use the Select Similar tool and learn how it's used. Click OK. So then you click on an object and every object that is similar to that will be selected. 6 circles because we're using object and class. If we just use class, it'll select 9 objects. It'll select 9 objects there. If we use object, just 1, 9 circles. So this Select Similar tool is extremely useful selecting objects that are somehow similar. Don't forget, save the settings to make it really quick. When you finish that exercise, go to your Active Layer button and choose the next exercise down, or the next layer if you prefer to call it that way. Attribute Mapping. The Attribute Mapping tool is going to use a tool which is this one here, Attribute Mapping tool. At this point I'd like you to change back to your Fundamentals workspace. Tools on the menu bar, Workspaces, and Fundamentals. So now we're back to the Fundamentals workspace. There's our Attribute Mapping tool there, and we can then click on an object like this one, and this area here, this grid, these 8 handles, these are the settings or the size of your hatch. If you go to one of the corner handles, you can stretch it and make the hatch bigger. If you go to a midpoint, you can click and you can rotate that hatch. This allows you to create other hatches other than you think you have access to. I've opened the attributes palette so you can see it. There's my hatch there, and it's gone blue. This means that I'm using local mapping. That's the change I made with the attribute mapping tool. This attribute mapping tool works with hatches, it works with gradients, it works with images, it works with textures. So it's quite powerful, and it's one of the tools that you'll be using later on. If you click on this button, you can see there's our local mapping. If you want to remove it, untick that box there, and you'll be back to the way you started. We won't need this again, so I'm going to close that. When you finish that exercise, go to your Active Layer button and choose the next layer down. This is the Reshape tool, and the Reshape tool is extremely powerful and is able to be used on several different objects. So we can use the Reshape tool on site models, roofs, slabs, hardscapes, landscape areas, polygons, polylines, lines, rectangles, all sorts of objects. So it is a really powerful tool. So just in brief terms, because we're not going to cover this in too much detail because there's so much to this tool, but in basic terms, this allows me to move a handle of a polygon. So when I click on a polygon, you'll see that the blue handles have changed. Now I've got one at each corner and one halfway down the middle. This mode here allows me to move one of those handles. You notice the cursor changes shape, click, move, click again, and it's changed that handle. This moves an edge. So let's go to a midpoint, click, and you'll see that as I move that edge, it's projecting the two adjoining faces or the two adjoining edges. So it's getting smaller, gets bigger. So that's a great tool, that one. This one will change my vertex type. Now, at the moment, these have all got pointy corners, or corner vertices is their real name. It's this one here. If I change this to a Bezier curve, you can see I can change the vertex type. And then you can go back to the corner vertex, change it back anytime you like. So this gives you the great flexibility of changing the shape of your polygon. This allows you to add a polygon. This is the add vertex, so we can add a vertex. So click, and because I've selected my corner vertex type, it's adding a corner vertex. And you'll notice the cursor changes shape when I get near a vertex. So that's the indicator that I can click and I can move it. The next mode is for deleting vertices. Notice the cursor changes shape. Each click will take away a vertex. And this mode is for hiding edges. So it allows you to hide edges. Great for if you're trying to create a detail of concrete, a concrete footing. But also when we're dealing with hardscapes, it allows us to turn off the edge of a hardscape, the border of a hardscape. When you finish that exercise, go to your Active Layer button and choose the next exercise down. Rotate. We're going to use our selection tool and click on an object to rotate. Now if you don't do that, if you just go straight to the rotate tool and then click, you'll get a warning. Hey, you've got to use the command key to select an object. If you're using a Windows machine, that will say that you have to use the Alt key. So hold down the command or the Alt key, then you can click on an object, and now we can rotate it, and there's our rotation protractor. First click is the center of the rotation. The second click is the point to rotate, and the third click is where you want it to go to, and you always get this preview. If you make a mistake, you can always hit the delete key, it'll undo the last click. If we choose the other mode, the rotate and duplicate, we can click for the center of the rotation, click to rotate or the point to rotate, and then rotate round, click, and now we've got two objects. When you finish that exercise, go to your Active Layer button and choose the next layer down. Flip. Right click. So I've got the selection tool, right click, rotate, flip horizontal, right click, rotate, flip vertical. So it is quite a cool way of just moving stuff on the screen, but you'll notice it flips it around its center. When you finish that, go to the Active Layer button, choose the next layer down, Mirror. There's our Mirror tool. So let's select our Mirror tool, it's this one here, and we've got two options, Standard Mode, so it'll just mirror the object that's selected, and the Duplicate, which will duplicate the object and place a copy somewhere. We can use our Command or our Alt key to select our object. The first click is the center of our rotation. If you can't see that cross, hold down the B key, there it is there, click, click, and there's our mirror plane, and there's our mirrored object. If you choose the standard mode, you won't get a copy, it will just mirror the object that you select. When you finish that exercise, go to your Active Layer button, choose the next layer down, the Split tool. This is the Split tool, and we use the Split tool for both 2D and 3D objects. So the first mode, it just splits when you go near an object and you can just split, and it will split walls as well as lines and rectangles. The second mode splits by line, so everything I pass through will get selected. These two modes control what objects I'm going to select. All objects or just the selected ones. So if you use the currently selected mode, it will only split objects that are selected. So let's turn off some of these. So that one, that one, that one, and that one. Now let's use that split mode. And we'll use it in the second mode here, so it will only split the selected objects. So go between 4 and 5. And you notice it didn't split some of those objects. I'm just going to undo that. Edit, undo, and I'm going to change to the third mode. So click at P4, click at P5, and then which bit do we want to keep? The arrow points to the side to keep, click, and you notice that that line wasn't selected, therefore it didn't get split. When you finish that exercise, go to your Active Layer button, choose the next line down, Connect and Combine. This is the Connect and Combine tool. There are 4 different modes. Let's start with a single object. So we click, click, and it just takes those across until it hits the boundary object. If they don't intersect the boundary object, it won't do anything. The last mode, you select the boundary object first, and then you click on all the lines that you want to project to that boundary. In the second mode, we select the first line and the second line, and it projects those until they touch each other. If we use the third mode, you'll see that not only does it intersect those two together, but it forms them into a single object, a polygon or a polyline. Don't try to join that bottom corner, it just won't join. When you finish that exercise, go to your Active Layer button, choose the next line down. When you finish that exercise, go to your Active Layer button and choose the next layer down. The Trim tool, it's this one that looks like a pair of scissors. Click on the object that you want to delete, and it'll delete it till it gets to the nearest boundary object. If you choose this mode, then it will limit your selection or limit your trimming to just the selected objects. When you finish that exercise, go to your Active Layer button, choose the next layer down. The Fillet tool. The Fillet tool allows us to put a radius in. I'm using metric, so 500 millimeters or around about 22 inches. And it will fillet lines or it will fillet polygons. The first mode will just place the circle without making a change. The second one will split the objects at that point, so that leaves the lines behind, but you see they're just tiny little lines, and you can then change the graphic style. The third mode, it tidies up, so it trims and extends the lines and it tidies up. When you finish that exercise, go to your Active Layer button and choose the next exercise. This is the chamfer, which is a bit similar to the fillet, but it uses a square chamfer. So we've got the standard mode, the split mode, and the one that trims up as well. We can put in the first line. Let's make this 24 inches or 600 millimeters. And it's going to work with the first and second lines. the first line in an angle, or the chamfer line length, so we can type in a length that we want it to end up. So it'll calculate the length. 600 and 600. Click OK, click and click. Click on the first line, click on the second line, and there it is. When you finish that exercise, go to your Active Layer button, choose the next exercise. I use the offset tool for all sorts of things. So while I'm just using lines at this point, we can also use offset to offset walls, to offset polygons, polylines, site modifiers, all kinds of things. We need to select an object if we haven't got an object selected already, and we also need to type in our distance. This again is going to be about 24 inches, 600 millimeters. If I try to click, I'll get an error message. So remember, Alt key or the Command key. So I've created a duplicate. So remember to use your Alt or Command key to select the next object. Let's do offset by point. Select the object, and then you click, and then you just move wherever you need to and line up with another object and then click. And in the last mode, we're going to choose that, select our object, and you'll notice this time, once I've clicked, I lose the original. It's not creating a duplicate, it is actually offsetting the original object. So anything you don't need a copy of, that's the mode to use. When you finish that exercise, go to your Active Layer button, choose the next layer down. This is the Clip tool. We need to select the object we're going to clip. Don't forget you can use your Command or your Alt key to select objects. This one will clip the center of the area. This one will take away the area outside. And this one will split objects. You might think that the split tool, that's this one that we used here, and this clip tool, may not be that useful for some things. But they are. They work on lots of different objects, so just try them out. They work on things like slabs and hardscapes and landscape areas and even viewports. So just remember that these are quite powerful tools. You may not understand what you're using them for at the moment, but they are quite powerful. We can use a polygon clip. We can use a circular clip. So that's splitting. So I'll select that object and clip. So you can use them to help build your drawings. When you finish that exercise, go to your Active Layer button and choose the next layer down. Move by points. This is our Move by Points tool. It has three main modes: Move mode, Distribute mode, and the reference point. And this is for keeping the original object. We have our preferences and OK. So here we might have one copy. We want to retain the original. We're going to click at P1, finish at P2, and remember Alt key or the Command key to select an object. So click to start, click to finish, and you can see it's a relative movement from P1 to P2, and it's copied my object. I can delete that. Now I can choose the second mode, the Distribute mode. Let's put 3 copies in. We'll start there. And I suppose I should actually select that first. If I don't, I'll get an error message. So click there, and I should get 3 copies. In this mode, select the object, click at a reference point, click there, and type in a distance. We want that to be 100 millimeters, and it's moved it. This also works with moving doors and windows and walls, so it's quite powerful. When you finish that exercise, go to your Active Layer button and choose the next exercise down. We can use our selection tool for this. One of the tricks with the selection tool is you can just grab hold of an object and move it. Don't need any special techniques, don't need any special mathematics, you can just grab hold of it and move it. I'm just going to undo that. We can also use our move command. Modify, move, move. And we can type in our distance. And it moves that object. When you finish that exercise, go to the active layer button, choose the next layer down. For this part of the exercise, we need to turn on our offset duplications in Vectorworks preferences. You can access Vectorworks preferences buttons here with this utility menu. Vectorworks preferences, offset duplications, that's this one. Click OK. So I'm just going to zoom in a little bit with my scroll wheel. I'm going to drag a copy of this up the screen. I'm going to type in the distance that I want, about 24 inches, enter once, and then Option key on a Macintosh, Control key on a Windows machine, let go of the mouse button. So that sets a distance and an angle. Now when you go up to edit and say duplicate, it'll take a copy of the same object, the same angle and the same distance. And there's a keyboard shortcut for that as well, which makes it really quick. When you finish that exercise, go to your active layer button and choose the next exercise down. Duplicate array. Duplicate array is for creating either linear, circular or rectangular arrays of objects. Make sure your object is selected, edit on the menu bar, duplicate array. So we can create a linear array, so it's creating them in a direction. We can create a circular array, so it'll create them round a circle. Or we can make a rectangular array. So let's try a linear array, X direction, 6 meters, there it is. Or you can just try dragging a copy with the Option or the Control key held down. Option key on a Macintosh, Control key on a Windows machine. When you finish that exercise, go to your active layer button, choose the next layer down. Stretch. Vectorworks doesn't have a real stretch. If I select all those objects, activate that option, you'll notice that as I stretch these objects, what's happening is the distance between that rectangle and that line is actually changing. So this isn't really stretch, this is interactive scaling. So it's scaling the distances of those things. However, if we go back to our Reshape tool, drag a marquee over those objects, let go of your mouse button, now I can click and it's a genuine stretch. It also works with walls. So back to my Reshape tool, drag my marquee like that, and then I can start stretching, and you can see it's moving everything that's inside that marquee. When you finish that exercise, go to your active layer button, choose the next layer down. Compose. If we have a look at this in detail, you'll see this is made up of lots of small parts. If I select all those parts, and then go to Modify on the menu bar, I can choose Compose. Compose will join all those together into a single object. It's a polyline, which means I can duplicate it, I can find the area of it, I can do engineering calculations on it. And the other part of that is Decompose. Modify on the menu bar, Decompose, and it breaks up into every small little object. When you finish that exercise, go to your active layer button, choose the next one down. I need to see everything, so let's just click there. So smoothing, modify on the menu bar, poly smoothing, Bezier. Or we can choose poly smoothing, cubic spline. Looks quite different. I'm just going to undo those. And the other one, poly smoothing, arc smoothing. Now arc smoothing and radius smoothing are the types of smoothing that will allow you to send your information to a CNC machine. CNC machines do not like Bezier smoothing. So if you're going to send this to a CNC machine, to a laser cutter or something like that, try converting that first of all to something like a Bezier spline, so it's got the shape you want. Then modify, poly smoothing, arc smoothing. So it smooths it into a series of arcs rather than a series of Bezier curves, because CNC machines don't like Beziers. Let's go to our next exercise, align and distribute. If I select those two, go to modify on the menu bar, align and distribute, I can choose to line up the left sides. Click OK. Let's look at this one. Modify, align and distribute. Let's align their right sides. There they are. If I undo those, so edit, undo, edit, undo. So let's start with that again. Let's select those two, right click, align and distribute. If I align left, it drags that one across. Let's try selecting the bottom one, align, distribute, align left. You notice it moves the top one across. So it depends which object you right click on in order to call the align distribute command. And the other one's going to show you here. I've selected all those objects, modify, align and distribute, and I can distribute them left and right or center. I can also distribute their centers top and bottom, and you can see it's aligned them all up for me so that it distributed them in one nice long line. When you finish that exercise, go to the next one, the join command. Select a couple of those lines, modify, join. Some people prefer this method of joining because there's a keyboard shortcut. Modify, see there, join. When you finish that exercise, go to your active layer button, choose the next exercise, add surface. In order to draw a complex shape, the easiest way to do it is to draw simple shapes like this, right click and then go add surface. And it's the easiest way to draw these complex shapes. You'll use this a lot when you're doing hardscapes, landscape areas, slabs, roofs, all kinds of stuff. We use this a lot. This is a great technique. Let's go to the next exercise. Clip surface. This is kind of similar. Select all that, right click, this time clip surface, and you can see it's actually taken away. So the object that's in front clips the object that's behind. Leaves the object selected that you can then delete it. Let's go to the next exercise, intersect surface. So in this situation, it's going to find where these two objects overlap. Right click, intersect surface. If we delete that one and that one, we're left with the intersection of those two surfaces. Let's go to the next exercise. Arc into segments. So in this case, we're going to take this object, we're going to split this arc up into parts. Drafting aids, arc into segments. How many segments do we want? Let's say 5. And you can see it leaves the arc behind, but it gives us these points. Let's just undo that and we'll look at the other option. So what we can do, we can draw lines, draw polygon, segment length, so we can actually split up and say I want it to be every 4 inches or every 100 millimeters, divide it up for me. And if you use lines, it'll create a whole series of individual lines. If you use polygons, you'll have what we had previously. Let's go to the next exercise. Line into segments. This is similar to the arc into segments, so modify, drafting aids, line into segments, but this one gives us the ability to place loci. Let's put in 5, and you notice it's deleted the line and put 5 loci, or 5 gaps. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 gaps, in other words 6 loci. When you finish that exercise, go to your active layer button, let's choose the next one down, creating dividing lines. Select the first line, select the second line as well. Modify on the menu bar, drafting aids, and create dividing lines. Click on the first line, click on the second line. So these two lines define the area that we're going to put our parts in. So they're going to go between that line and this line. First click, this is the length of the line that we're going to copy across, and that's the end of it. How many divisions do we want? Let's make it 9. And you can see it's then taken this line, that was the start circle, that was the end circle, 9 copies. When you finish that exercise, go to the last one, simplify polys. In this case, I've got a polygon with 321 vertices. Now sometimes when we're doing other operations in Vectorworks like site modifying, site models, we need to have a way of simplifying our polygon down to small manageable chunks. I've worked on some site models where we've got 5,000 vertices on a polygon. We need to simplify that to make it manageable. Modify, drafting aids, simplify polys, maximum deviation. So how much do we want to go up and down? Let's make it an inch, 25 mil. That's quite a change, and you can actually see the difference. But there's only 36 vertices, 1/10. Let's undo that and we'll do it again. I'll use a smaller number this time. So modify, drafting aids, simplify polys. Let's make it half an inch, 12 mil, or even less than that, quarter of an inch, 6 mil. It's still got a substantially reduced number of vertices, only 74. You can almost not see the difference, just about, but it's quite small. This is the last exercise in this chapter. I know it's been a long chapter and I know there's a lot of work in here, but these are all really, really valuable. I'd like you to come back on a regular basis and go through this exercise again. I'd like you to open up the exercise file and refresh your memory about what the tools are and what they do. I've had one client who phoned me up a couple of years after starting Vectorworks saying, I wish we had a tool that we could use to trim off the ends of bits. I went, like the trim tool, like this one? He went, yeah, that one. How long's that been there? Like, well, ever since you've known it. So there's a real danger that if you don't regularly refresh your memory, you will forget that some of these tools exist. So don't forget, come back to these exercises some other time. Even if you can't play the movie, come back and repeat the exercises.